Hi, thanks for tuning in. Today we're going to be discussing the pros and cons of living on the Gold Coast and what you need to be aware of if you're considering building on the Gold Coast. We're going to have a look at some of the different suburbs, and we're also going to put the drone up and have a look at some of the beautiful Gold Coast scenery. So stick around because I think you're going to get some value. Right, let's start by discussing the pros and cons of living on the Gold Coast. Let's start with the pros because there's many of them. To begin with, the Gold Coast is absolutely beautiful. It's undeniable. It really is a beautiful, relaxed and laid back place to live. I personally absolutely love it. I live here by choice. I didn't grow up here. I moved here and I couldn't be happier. It is beautiful. The beaches are fantastic. There's kilometres and kilometres of beautiful sandy beaches. You'll be able to find a spot that's busy or a spot that's quiet. There literally is a beautiful coastline that runs for kilometres down the coast where you can choose where you want to go. The amenities on the Gold Coast are next level, whether it's schools, shopping, hospitals, whatever you need, they are here. The transport options out of the Gold Coast are really good. The Gold Coast airport is really easily accessible, or you've just got Brisbane up the road. There is a lot of good employment options here, and there also is the option that a lot of people do, which is working in Brisbane but living on the Gold Coast. I've personally done that for about 10 or 15 years, worked with developers out of Brisbane and lived on the Gold Coast, and that is a lifestyle that I've really enjoyed. Let's talk quickly about the weather. The weather on the Gold Coast is about as good as you could want. Some people may not be used to the summer, but you acclimatise really quickly when you live here and you'll get used to the weather. It's really consistent too, especially during those winter months. I find the Gold Coast winter temperature is really, really nice, beautiful clear days, and it's cool overnight. And then you get used to summer. Live somewhere with air conditioning if you don't like it too hot. But the weather, I think, here on the Gold Coast is definitely spot on. I also find the Gold Coast, compared to capital cities around Australia, is relatively affordable. And if you look at what you can buy and the lifestyle you get here on the Gold Coast compared to the capital cities, I believe that you have a higher standard of living by living on the Gold Coast. Enjoying the amenities, the weather, the beaches, it really is a great place to live, and it is affordable compared to those capital cities. Let's discuss a couple of the cons. I don't think the Gold Coast has the best transport system. It really does need some attention. One of the problems is the Gold Coast is spread right out. So to run a transport system for the population here is a lot more difficult than what you get in a capital city, because the Gold Coast realistically runs from the border of New South Wales all the way up to the northern Gold Coast. To have a transport system that operates that whole way, public transport, is really difficult. So the transport system here is lacking. I have personally lived on the Gold Coast and worked in Brisbane, and I can tell you that the M1 sucks. I hate being stuck in traffic. It really isn't enjoyable. But if you weigh up where you might be living compared to the Gold Coast, then you just put up with it. But that is one thing you're going to have to get used to. If you want to live on the Gold Coast and work in Brisbane, there is a Coomera connector being built, but when that actually happens, who knows? So if you're going to commute to Brisbane, get yourself some audio books or listen to YouTube videos or whatever it may be to kill the time, because you're going to have a fair bit of time stuck in traffic, and I don't see that changing anytime soon. The traffic around the actual Gold Coast too is starting to get a little bit worse. It seems to be weekends. I think everyone from Brisbane comes down to the Gold Coast. So from Friday afternoons onwards, sometimes the traffic here is bad, but then it's probably like that in all cities. So that's something you just have to deal with. Tourists may be an issue to some people. Sometimes parts of the Gold Coast are packed with tourists in the high tourist seasons, I should say. In the high tourist seasons, it can be pretty packed with tourists, but I don't tend to go into those areas, so it doesn't really affect me, but it may affect some people that want to go into those areas. There isn't really any protected beaches. The beaches here can be pretty unforgiving. They're definitely surf beaches. If you compare to, say, the quiet beaches of Thailand, it's a different beach environment. So if you're going to the beach here, make sure you're a good swimmer, because there is pretty unforgiving conditions. There really isn't any quiet, protected, sheltered beaches here on the Gold Coast. Any that are actually protected tend to be in around the Nerang River or the Broadwater, which can be a little bit sharky. So you don't get the protected beaches you get somewhere like Thailand, because you've just got a really unprotected coastline. But it's whether or not you like that. If you like surfing, you'll love all the beaches here. I think that probably wraps up about the cons of living on the Gold Coast. Importantly, the pros much outweigh the cons. I love the Gold Coast and I'm sure you will love it too. Let's discuss a few of the important aspects that you need to realise if you're wanting to build here on the Gold Coast. What I want to do is bring up the Google Maps and let's have a look at a few of the different suburbs on the Gold Coast and let's discuss a few of these areas. I think if I were to break down the Gold Coast into 4 key areas, you're probably looking at the southern Gold Coast, which is your Coolangatta type area. And then you've got the central Gold Coast, which is your Broadbeach, Mermaid type area. And then you go to the northern Gold Coast, which is far north, the end of the Gold Coast, which is your Pimpamar, Coomera type areas. And then we'll call it the western part of the Gold Coast. And let's just have a look at a few of the different suburbs and the types of houses that are actually being built there. And let's have a look at a few of those median prices so that you've got a bit of an idea where you might be looking. So I think it's easy just to have a look at the map to do that. So I'm going to bring the maps up onto the screen and we're going to talk through a few of these areas.
Okay, just looking at the map now. As you can see, the Gold Coast stretches from way up north, basically at the border of Beenleigh, and then if you look, it goes all the way down south to Coolangatta or the New South Wales border. This highlights, just shows you how long the Gold Coast is, and it shows why the transportation here isn't that good, because you've got 600,000 people here, which isn't massive compared to your capital cities, but it stretches so far. So it really does put a stretch on the transport system here, but that's something that we've just got to put up with. This map really highlights just how long a coastline we've got here. Shows you all the beaches. Basically, there's about 70 kilometres of beaches on the Gold Coast. They stretch from Coolangatta in the south all the way up here to the entrance to the Broadwater, which is the Seaway. So as you can see, plenty of choices there for beaches. You will find one that you like, most definitely. Okay, just looking at the map again now, any of the new land releases tend to be in the northern part of the Gold Coast. That's definitely got the most new land releases. So if you're looking for a block of land where you can where you don't have to knock down a house, where you can just buy a block of land, it tends to be in this northern area. Ormo, Pimpamar and Coomera probably having the most land coming on. Down on the central Gold Coast, so this type area here, this is really knock and rebuild territory, your higher density blocks of land in there. Out to the west is where you're looking at your acreage type blocks. Not major new releases of land there. There may be in the future if there's higher density put in, but that'll be down to council. And then as you look down to the southern Gold Coast, again, that's higher density, but in towards the Currumbin Valley type areas here, there is some larger acreage blocks. But the majority of new building happening on the Gold Coast is up in the northern part of the Gold Coast. Other than that, this area here all tends to be going into higher density. So if you're looking in this central part of the Gold Coast here, you're going to be knocking down a house. So that's something you just have to keep in mind. And then down to the southern Gold Coast, realistically, unless you're in this sort of slightly west area, it's going to be knock and rebuild territory as well.
It's worth noting that in the central and southern parts of the Gold Coast, the land market is really tight. It's already built out. There isn't a lot of new land estates, so you're really looking at that knock and rebuild market. So we might discuss in a minute knock and rebuilds.
But before we discuss the knock and rebuilds, I just want to give you an idea of some of the median house prices around the Gold Coast, just to give you a bit of an idea. So if we look towards the northern Gold Coast, Coomera, you're looking about 740,000. Pimpamar, you're looking about 680,000, and then Ormo, you're looking about 755,000. And then as we go down into the central area here, Broadbeach Waters 1.884, Mermaid Waters, you're looking about 1.6, and then Burleigh Waters a bit further down, you're looking at about 1.5. And then as you go down into the Coolangatta area, Palm Beach, you're looking about 1.443. and Coolangatta about 1.475. So that gives you a bit of an idea about some of the house prices you're looking at, particularly if you're looking at a knock and rebuild. You've really got to try and find a well-priced house to knock down.
I think it's really important discussing building on the Gold Coast that you're actually going to build a fairly different product depending on what part of the Gold Coast you're looking at. So if you're in this central part, it's going to be higher end or higher density. You're going to either knock down a house and build something high end, or you're going to knock down a house and then build something that's actually higher density, like duplexes, triplexes, or even building up. That's really important. If you're looking towards the northern Gold Coast where you've got those land estates, then you're going to be looking at your standard smaller type single occupancy homes, single family homes, as opposed to the higher density stuff. Look, as always, if you're getting value from this video, make sure you like, subscribe, and hit the little bell so that you're notified with each new video that we upload. And as always, if you've got any questions regarding new property, send through an email. I've got the address on the screen now, ask@newproperty.com.au. Send through any questions that you've got and one of our friendly team will come back to you. When you knock down a house, you realistically here on the Gold Coast got to allow 8 to 12 weeks probably for that to happen. The demolition companies seem to be fairly well booked out. The process is that you have to get a BA to knock down a house, which is a building approval. That can be done through a private certifier. Once that approval takes place, you then have to get Energex to come out and disconnect the power. Power companies, individual power company and Energex get involved, and the process seems to be, for something that seems pretty simple, can drag on. So allow a few weeks for that to take place. Once the power's off, then the demolition company can come in and do the demolition. Rates at the moment for those standard small brick houses tend to be around 25 to 35K, 25 being the lower end and being a little bit hard to get, but allow 35 grand and around 8 weeks for this to take place. So if you are looking at building on the Gold Coast, know that you've got to have, and you're doing a knock and rebuild, know that you're going to need that 8 weeks and add that into your budget. Really important here on the Gold Coast that you know the suburb you're in if you're looking to build. You really don't want to overcapitalise and you really don't want to undercapitalise. Particularly in these areas, the central Gold Coast, where you're doing a knockdown, you need to realise that your starting land value is very high because you're buying an existing house. So you're in the million, you're spending $1 million plus just on the block of land before you've even knocked it down and built. So just be realistic about what your base cost is going to be before you start building. If you're looking at the northern Gold Coast or one of those new land estates, it's a bit easier to judge what your starting price is because the land prices will be fairly consistent. In saying that, recently there's been a heap of growth in land prices, but there is still new developments coming on. They tend to be around the northern Gold Coast or inland a little bit more. Remember also in these central suburbs where the streets are tight that you're going to have a few of the issues there around building. If it's hard for you to get in there and park, it's hard for trades to get in there and park. It's hard for suppliers to come and get their supplies to site. So make sure, obviously, have a look at the site and is it going to be feasible to get a decent building team in there. Also remember that if you're on a busy road, you're going to have all the issues like traffic control and getting those approvals too. Okay, I hope you got value from that. As always, if you've got any questions at all, send through an email. And if you got value from the video, like, subscribe, and tick the little bell so that you're notified with each new video that we upload. Thanks for tuning in, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Bye.